probably heard the phrase, eat your vegetables. I think probably a lot of us have heard that since we were kids. And that really dates back quite a few decades in American culture. But the phrase really continues to be more relevant than ever to health and nutrition. So as our science has advanced, research is now really finding more benefits to plant foods than we were really ever capable of discovering before, from our mental health to physical health to even the health of our gut bacteria. Plant foods are really shown to impact our health on all these scales and provide benefits that can let us live longer, healthier lives. So today I'm really going to get more into the nitty-gritty of how these foods are helpful for our minds and our bodies and our gut, and then delve into some steps that you can take to increase some plant foods in your diet over time. So again, my name is Kelsey. I am a registered dietitian for Pro Healthcare, and I am an oncology dietitian, which means I work with patients who either have cancer, who are at high risk for cancer, going through treatment, or maybe have finished treatment. So even though my nutrition background is skewed more towards cancer, the same foods that are recommended for preventing and fighting cancer are really the same foods that are recommended for any person to prevent chronic disease and maintain overall health. So I will try to keep things as general as possible today, but of course I couldn't resist adding some details about cancer specifically. Oh man, did this kick me out again? Can you see this, Ashley? Okay, good.
Now it's black.
Okay, sorry guys. Hopefully this doesn't happen too much, but bear with me. Okay, so I'll look ahead. First, I'll define what a plant-based diet actually means. Then I'll discuss the benefits of the plant-based diet, including nutrient properties, physical health, gut health, and mental health. And then we'll kind of discuss some tips on how to adopt more of a plant-based diet over time, including some recipe swaps where I'll show you plant-based versions of more traditionally meat-based recipes. So the first concern, what is a plant-based diet? A whole food plant-based diet includes a focus on whole or minimally refined plant foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and beans or legumes. And it excludes or minimizes animal products or highly refined and processed foods. So it just basically means that the majority of foods on the plate are minimally refined plant foods, that the plants are the forethought of the meal and not really the afterthought or the side dish. So this doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a vegan or a vegetarian. You can include animal products, but again, they wouldn't be the focus of the meal. And let's just remember, you can also be a vegan and not fit into this category. You know, potato chips, Oreos, those are all vegan foods, but if that was the basis of your diet, this wouldn't be a whole food plant-based diet. So what does this look like? On the left of the screen, you'll see what we call the My Plate, which is the USDA recommendation of what a balanced meal looks like. This kind of replaced the classic food pyramid, which I think is a little bit more user-friendly in practice because it does show a plate and not the pyramid, which we don't eat pyramids. So, so you'll see this is an example of a balanced meal. About half of the plate they say to try to fill up with fruits and vegetables. So you'll see this one's primarily vegetables, but you could have some fruit in there too. A quarter of the plate would be your whole grain or starch, like a potato. And then the other quarter of your plate would be your protein. In this case, it would be, this is a plant-based protein, the black beans. But this could also be involving animal products as well. So your chicken could be your protein instead of the beans, and that would be, again, about a quarter of the plate. A quarter of the plate being the grain or the rice in this case. And then again, half of the plate being non-starchy fruits and vegetables, which in this case, again, is very vegetable heavy, but you could have some fruits in there as well. So again, on the left-hand side of the screen, that's the My Plate, which is the USDA or US Department of Agriculture recommendations for a balanced diet. On the right-hand side is the New American Plate, which was created by the American Institute of Cancer Research. And this looks a little bit different. They recommend that just at least 2/3 of the plate is based on plant foods like whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and beans. And the remaining 1/3 or less could be filled with the animal-based protein of your choice, meat, fish, dairy, or eggs. So they're a little bit different, but you can see that either way they're focusing on the emphasis being the plant foods with a smaller emphasis on the animal-based foods, if you do choose to include them. So why do these health organizations push plant foods as the focus of the meal? So now we can kind of delve into the science behind these recommendations. The plant foods have a multitude of benefits, which is why as an oncology dietitian, I usually stress to my patients that you can obtain the most benefits from the whole plant-based foods rather than supplements or processed shakes and powders and things like that. Time and time and again, research has really shown us that those things don't really stand up to the real foods because the real foods have a multitude of benefits. And as you process those down, a lot of times they lose some of those benefits. So the major benefits of plant foods would be fiber, which I'll talk about in more detail later, unsaturated fats, which are heart-healthy fats, as opposed to more saturated fats, which would be found more in animal products or processed foods. Omega-3s, maybe you guys have heard of those. Those are essential fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory, and they're really lacking in our Western diets. Plant foods also have a multitude of vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals, which I will go into next. So phytochemicals is a weird word, but really what it is they're just nutrients that occur naturally in plants. So the word phyto actually means plant in Greek. So it's really just translated to plant chemicals. And these chemicals provide plants with color and aroma and flavor, but they also provide additional health benefits to us. So I listed a couple there that you might have heard of before. There's actually thousands of these different compounds, and they're all found again in plant foods. So phytochemicals provide a whole suite of benefits to our health, and I've just listed some of those benefits here. The first one you'll see, oops, let me just kind of get back into this. Sorry, guys, bear with me here. The first one there is antioxidants. You've probably heard the word antioxidants thrown around a lot in the media. If you're not sure what that is, basically antioxidants protect us by neutralizing compounds in the body called free radicals. Free radicals are produced in the body naturally, and they do play some essential roles for our health, but an excessive amount can build up as a result of environmental exposures to things like tobacco, radiation, and pollution. And when there's too much in the body, it can cause oxidative damage, which can harm our cells. And the oxidative damage can set the stage for heart disease and cancer and other issues like that. So the antioxidants in plant foods can help keep the load of those free radicals down in our body and therefore kind of reduce risk of those diseases. Plant foods are also very anti-inflammatory. The phytochemicals have anti-inflammatory properties. Excess inflammation can promote chronic disease like heart disease and diabetes, and cancer cells also thrive in an inflammatory environment, so it's helpful to have these compounds reduce that inflammation in our body. Also, many phytochemicals help stimulate immunity, which further protects us from illness. I know a lot of people are mostly concerned about that right now with COVID, so of course get a lot of plant foods in, and that can help protect us from illness. There are also some added benefits that these compounds have for preventing and fighting cancer in particular. For example, laboratory studies have shown that they can reduce cancer activity by inhibiting tumor growth, detoxifying carcinogens, slowing cancer cell growth rate, and repairing damaged cells. And then lastly, there are certain phytochemicals like those found in soy foods and in flaxseed that can actually help regulate our hormones, which may be helpful for hormonally based cancers like prostate cancer and breast cancer. And research is really still looking into the impact of these in human studies. So here's a chart that shows some of the main groups of phytochemicals, their food sources, and their benefits. And like I said, there's more than 1,000 of these compounds that are even known to us, and each of them have their own benefits. Because these are often associated with the colors in the plants, we usually suggest that you try to get a variety of colors in, or we usually say, eat the rainbow, which of course doesn't mean grab a bag of Skittles, but to eat a lot of different colored plant foods. And I promise that's my only dad joke this lecture. But it's also really appealing to our taste buds and to our eye to have more color on the plate. So that's also nice. And then again, I have a lot of patients who bring up superfoods. They hear a lot about, is this food a superfood? Is that food a superfood? And that term is kind of misleading. Really what research finds is, again, variety is key, and there's no perfect food. So you don't necessarily just have to concentrate on one really great thing. They're all great. And if you don't really like one, that's okay, because there's plenty of them that would provide benefits to you. So just to give you a couple interesting facts on some of the more common and then maybe not so common foods, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the powerful antioxidant effects of berries, but really don't overlook your common apple. Apples contain flavanols or flavonoids, which I circled there. Those are phytochemicals that have been shown to actually inhibit cancer growth and spread. They can actually potentially reduce the expression of genes that promote cancer and increase the expression of genes that suppress tumors. So it's really incredible that these might be working basically at the gene level to reduce our cancer in our body. They're also relatively cheap and available year-round in Wisconsin, which is definitely a plus for us, because I know fruit can get a little dicey in the winter. I also like to touch on soy foods because they've gotten kind of a bad reputation from initial studies that were conducted in mice. So the original studies in mice found that soy might promote the growth of breast cancer, but human studies haven't shown that at all. They basically have shown that we metabolize soy differently than mice, which we're not mice, so that's not too surprising. And soy actually might be protective against cancer for us. So this is due to the phytochemicals they contain called isoflavones that may limit the production of cancer-related hormones and also work as an antioxidant. So the American Institute of Cancer Research does recommend that you can have 1 to 2 servings of soy foods per day as part of a balanced diet. So a question that I commonly get is it better to eat foods, your plant foods, raw or cooked? So my answer is both. There are certain nutrients that are best absorbed cooked. For example, cooked carrots allow you to absorb the antioxidant they contain, beta-carotene, magnitudes higher than raw. And canned tomatoes are actually higher in their antioxidant called lycopene. But some nutrients are actually higher in raw foods like vitamin C, which is very heat unstable. So as you cook the cooked food, the vitamin C actually is reduced. So again, kind of getting a mixture of raw and cooked really ensures that you're going to get the most benefits. And then I also really just suggest eating them the way you like them because they'll stick in the diet more. And just kind of a note on this, I was watching a master class on human evolution and food the other day. And one of the interesting things that they presented was that potentially the innovation of cooking food way back in human history was maybe one of the human behaviors that helped enhance our brain growth because it allowed us more energy for our brains and less energy for digesting that raw roughage. So if you enjoy cooked vegetables more than raw, there's perhaps an evolutionary reason for that. So just a review on this one, get a variety of plant foods in, either raw or cooked, really whichever way ensures that you're going to get them in more often. All right, and then here's another question. What nutrient is important to our bodies even though we don't digest it? And I'll give you a second just to kind of think of this one. If you have the notes in front of you, you might have the answer, but try not to peek. All right, so I did see someone put it in the chat. It's fiber, yes. It's a tricky one. So fiber is actually defined by plant material that is indigestible to the human body. But our beneficial gut bacteria love it. So they can break it down and they derive nutrients for themselves, but also for our bodies. So the gut microbiota, or basically just our population of gut bacteria, affects our health so much that it is suggested that it functions as a separate organ in our body. And an imbalance of bacteria has been linked with a lot of GI conditions like IBS, IBD, autoimmune conditions, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. But research is still really trying to tease out the significance of those associations. What we do know is that plant-based diets can positively affect our gut bacteria. So they found that plant-based eaters have more good bacteria and less pathogenic species, or what we would call bad bacteria, and that plant-based diets can promote a more diverse and stable bacterial ecosystem. So diversity is a good thing. Diversity has an association also with lower BMIs or body weight, reduced risk for obesity and metabolic syndrome, better arterial function, so good for the heart, and then reduced inflammation. All right, and this is a diagram that shows our GI tract. So as food moves through our gut, you'll see most of our nutrients are absorbed in the small intestine, except fiber. Fiber actually goes all the way through untouched by our system until it gets to the colon, where it is then fermented by bacteria. So as you can see on the left there, the majority of our gut bacteria lives in our colon for that purpose. So again, when we digest fiber, the bacteria ferment or metabolize that fiber in the colon, and then one of the byproducts of that fermentation process is short-chain fatty acids. So the short-chain fatty acids have been shown to help improve immunity, reduce inflammation, prevent obesity, play a protective role against type 2 diabetes, IBD, and other immune diseases, and help maintain a healthy colon, which is one of the reasons why they think high fiber diets may reduce the risk for colorectal cancers. So some other benefits of fiber are that it helps you feel full longer, which is great if you are trying to lose weight and eat less. It actually also helps push food and other material through our gut. It acts kind of like a broom to sweep out toxins and ensures a shorter contact time with any toxins or carcinogens that are ingested. It helps promote regular bowel movements, which everyone's usually happy about. It slows the absorption of sugar into the blood, which is very helpful for managing diabetes, and it potentially can also help lower cholesterol. So one of the reasons we recommend whole forms of plant foods is due to the fiber and nutrients that are lost through the processing of food. So for example, there's about 4 grams of fiber in a medium apple, and then about 1 gram in applesauce, and then you kind of are basically left with none in juice, plus added sugars usually. So another question here, what is better? Would it be better to eat a whole fruit, to drink a smoothie, or to do the juicing, which is kind of a new trend now? Well, all are fairly healthy options, but there are definitely some things to consider. For example, you are consuming much more fruit in the liquid form at a time. So you can usually get lots more fruit in there, which may not be great if you are struggling to manage blood sugars, if you have type 2 diabetes. But it might be helpful for those people who otherwise don't get a lot of fruits or vegetables in their diet. And that's a great way for them to pack them all in and get their recommended amount in one day. Another thing to consider is that fiber is still remaining in the smoothie, so you don't filter out that fiber. But in juicing, a lot of that fiber is lost. So you actually might be losing some of the benefits if you're juicing a lot and not eating those whole foods. However, a lot of my patients during cancer treatment may be struggling with diarrhea, and having that fiber out of the juice can be better tolerated for them. And the juice can then be an opportunity for them to get a lot of vitamins and minerals. So again, there's kind of benefits and there's downsides to some of these things. Kind of the bottom line, I would say, is I usually recommend that people try to get 5 to 9 servings per day of fruits and vegetables. as many as possible in the whole food form. I would count whole fruits or vegetables added to smoothies as part of this recommendation. But again, if you're a diabetic and you have difficulty controlling blood sugar, it's probably better to consume just a little bit of that smoothie at a time if you're going to do a smoothie instead of in one sitting. Okay, so now we can see that there are all these potential benefits of plant foods, but what does the research say regarding people who eat more of them? According to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the latest research shows that vegetarians and vegans have a lower risk of health conditions like heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, stroke, and some types of cancer and obesity. Basically, they said people who adopt vegetarian diets have lower body mass indexes, better control of blood pressure and blood glucose, less inflammation, lower cholesterol levels compared to non-vegetarians. They think a lot of those benefits come from the low intake of saturated fat and the high intake of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, soy, nuts, and seeds, which are all rich in fiber and phytochemicals, those chemicals we talked about before in the plant foods. So even though this research is specifically looking at vegetarians and vegans, again, you can get these similar benefits from adopting more of a plant-based diet and still being a meat eater. So for the numbers people out there, I did want to give you some statistics on plant-based diets and disease risk. A meta-analysis of 7 studies, which totaled over 100,000 participants, suggested that vegetarians have an 18% lower cancer incidence and 29% lower mortality from heart disease than non-vegetarians. And in a large prospective study of plant-based eaters, that used 4.1 million person years of follow-up, is a lot, revealed that the people who were most adherent to a plant-based dietary pattern had 34% lower risk of developing diabetes compared to those least adherent. So some pretty significant stuff there. For mental health, the relationship between mental health and nutrition is really still being teased out. There's some solid research so far that shows some strong associations between certain types of food and diet and mental health status, but there still is a pretty big lack of experimental studies to prove causation. So the results of the correlational studies, or those association studies, so far have found that increased consumption of diets that are rich in fruits and vegetables is associated with increased reported happiness, higher levels of mental health and well-being, and diets that are high in fruits, vegetables, fish, whole grains, which would basically be like the Mediterranean diet, which would be a plant-based dietary pattern, has been linked with reduced likelihood of depression in several reviews and meta-analyses, which are pretty strong study designs because they combine data from many studies, so that reduces the probability that the findings were due to chance or due to poor study design. But like I said, the next step in research is really to gather more data from experimental studies so we can really tease out if there is a cause and effect relationship. But so far, these links are pretty strong. So what would be some of the potential mechanisms or biological reasons these plant foods would improve our mental health? There are some pretty good theories out there. For example, the high concentrations of antioxidants in these plant foods may reduce oxidative stress, which can play a contributing role to depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. But they've found that only food sources of antioxidants have shown benefits, not supplements. So it may be more complex than just the antioxidants themselves. For example, folate, fiber, our gut microbiota, things like that. So low folate, which is in dark leafy vegetables, can be a risk factor for severe depression. And then there's actually been a lot of studies now that have looked into our gut bacteria and fiber and mental health. So high fiber diets can promote diversity, diverse gut microbiota, and that is associated with a reduced likelihood of depression. research is really kind of looking into more of what we call the gut-brain axis, which is a signaling pathway between the gut and the brain that allows them to communicate through things like hormones and neurotransmitters, which is really cool. If you ever get a chance to read about this stuff, it is really interesting. But they've found that a large portion of our serotonin, which is the happy neurotransmitter, is actually produced in our gut by our gut bacteria. So gut microbes can produce GABA as well. It's another neurotransmitter that reduces anxiety and depression-like behavior. So potentially, if we're keeping our gut bacteria happy, our gut bacteria can help keep us happy, which is really interesting. All right, so now that we've looked into a lot of the benefits of a plant-based diet, let's talk about some steps we can make to add more plants into our daily regimen. As a dietitian, I really recommend small gradual steps to promote healthy lifestyle, dietary patterns, because research really strongly shows that crash dieting doesn't work in the long term. So there's no need to overhaul your diet in one night. Take one thing at a time. So one change you could start with would be to add one fruit or vegetable to each meal or snack. Or let's say that seems a little ambitious for you. Maybe you're starting with really none in the diet. Then maybe for you, a more realistic goal would be to add a fruit or vegetable to just one meal per day and then bump that up over time. Some other tips to increasing fruits and vegetable intake would be to keep fresh fruits and veggies on hand for snacks or visible in the kitchen. Often what's most convenient for us to grab is what we'll go for first. So I usually recommend put the chips away in the cabinet or cupboards and put some fresh fruit in a fruit bowl on the table. I also have some patients who like to pre-cut vegetables and put them in snack-sized containers and then stick them in the fridge. So they're an easier choice. So when you have that urge to snack, again, you're picking those healthier choices because they're the easier choice. If you're pretty good with those steps, then maybe you can focus more on increasing your portions of plant foods at mealtime by making them more of the focus of the dish instead of the side. So remember, your end goal is to try to fill up about 2/3 of the plate with plant foods, and eventually you'd want to try to aim for about 5 to 9 servings of fruits or vegetables per day. That might seem like a lot, but remember, again, this is a goal you can work up to over weeks, over months, or even years. Another goal you can make is to swap your refined grains with whole grains. If you're not a fan of the taste or texture of whole grains, you can find white whole wheat breads now, which is actually a whole grain, but it's made from a lighter type of grain called a white wheat berry. It's just as nutritious as any other whole grain, but kind of looks and tastes more like a white bread. I haven't seen it a ton on the market, but I have seen it. Otherwise, you can try maybe like a 50-50 white and wheat blend as you get used to more of the taste of a whole wheat. For example, I have a lot of patients who like to mix white and wheat pasta or white rice and brown rice as they're kind of getting used to that thicker texture. It's also really important to know your labels because marketing is very tricky. So I'm going to do a couple of these with you guys. So here is a Sara Lee honey wheat bread, which sounds pretty good, right? It says wheat. I would assume that would be healthy. Now, when you're looking at this label, you want to hone in on two things. The first ingredient, which I've circled, and the fiber content, which I've also circled. You'll see the first ingredient of this bread is an enriched wheat flour, which sounds pretty good, right? It's enriched, that sounds healthy. I see some vitamins there. But actually, rich wheat flour is a flour in which most of the natural vitamins and minerals were extracted. This is done to give the bread a finer texture and to increase the shelf life. So unfortunately, it's not as good as it sounds. This process removes the bran and the germ of the wheat, which are the parts that contain the fiber and a lot of the nutrients. And then they just add some of the nutrients back in to call it enriched. Legally, they have to actually add some of it back in. So it's not equivalent to the nutrition you would get from the whole grain, where the bran and the germ are still included in the bread. So enriched wheat flour has very little fiber because a lot of that fiber comes again from that bran of the grain, the outer shell. So you'll see this bread in the fiber category is less than 1 gram, which is not a very high fiber bread. A high fiber bread we would see should be kind of in the range I like to see is like 3 to 5 grams. So this one, unfortunately, is not the best choice. Let's try another one. So this one, Food Life Cinnamon Raisin, 7 sprouted grains. The first ingredient is 100% whole wheat flour. That's what you want to see. You want to see the word whole, whether it's whole wheat or whole sprouted grain or whatever the type of grain is. The word whole ensures that the nutritious parts of the grain were not removed. If the whole wheat or grain is the second ingredient, it can legally contain anywhere from 1 to 50% of the whole grain flour. So you could really be getting a bread that has very little whole grain flour in it. So seeing it as the first ingredient is a good way to ensure you're getting a good amount of that whole grain flour. They also have like stamps on breads now that will say 100% whole grain. So that's nice to see as well. The other trick again is to look at the fiber. This bread has 3 grams per slice. And again, I would say anywhere 3 grams above per slice would be considered a high fiber choice. I've seen loaves with 5 to 6 grams per slice, and that would be really high fiber. All right, so another goal you can make over time would be to reduce your intake of animal products. For example, you can swap out animal proteins with plant proteins once a week for a meatless Monday. Or maybe you're one of those people who really likes to have animal protein at every meal, and that's not doable to you. In that case, you could just try to reduce your portions of meat, dairy, and eggs to 1 serving per meal. Or over time, try shifting your portions so that the animal products take up again about 1/3 of your plate. But again, this doesn't have to happen overnight. So, for example, if you're more of the plate on the left, over time you can reduce your portions of meat slowly and gradually until you reach something more like the plate on the right. And using the vegetables that you like and the fruits that you like. Doesn't necessarily have to be the ones shown here. I know it could take a while to get from one to the other. And some of you might be thinking, you know, I could never be satisfied with that small a piece of meat. I hear that a lot too. But you'll see the sides on the plate are high fiber foods. And the fiber, again, is going to help promote that feeling of fullness. So again, this would be a slow change you're making over time. So your body could basically adjust to these new portions and distributions of food, which is actually smart for the fiber as well. If you go from having a very low fiber to a very high fiber diet quickly, it actually can cause a lot of gas and discomfort when you're digesting. But if you add that fiber in your diet a little bit more slowly and gradually, your body can have some time to get used to it. So if you're interested in trying new plant proteins, you can try beans, lentils, nuts, quinoa, seeds, soy, and hemp. If you're not familiar with soy, there's a lot of different soy products. Edamame is one that's found in Asian cuisine a lot. It's an immature soybean, looks green, and it's in a pod, kind of like a green bean. Tofu is another one. I think people kind of get hung up on the texture of that, but there are different ways to prepare it so it's not as squishy. And it really does take the flavor of what you cook it in. It's pretty mild flavor itself. Tempeh is a fermented soy. There's also soy nuts you can snack on. There's soy milk products, soy yogurt, and hemp is another plant protein. Most people usually get like a hemp powder and add it to a smoothie for some extra protein. Okay, so one of the most important things to keep in mind is to try to find recipes that excite you. It's really more helpful to make this a positive lifestyle change and not think about it as a diet. So if you don't like kale, I don't suggest you start out by trying to force yourself to eat a big kale salad. Stick with the flavors and the types of foods that you like best, and go from there. And get inspired. Go on the internet, look up some plant-based recipes, and find the ones that look good to you. Personally, I love Mexican food and Asian food, so a lot of the dishes that I make kind of surround those flavors, but you can find them for any kind of cuisine that you like. And I also really recommend trying to think about what you can add to your diet instead of what you can take away. So what types of things can you bring to the plate or to a certain dish that you make at home normally that you wouldn't have tried before? All right, so to get into these plant-based recipe swaps. And I think you guys all have the recipes for those, so you can try these at home. I definitely recommend modifying them depending on what type of flavors you like. A lot of these are very modifiable recipes. So the first one is a lamb gyro. The one that I've given you is a roasted chickpea gyro. If you haven't used chickpeas before, they're fairly easy to deal with. You can buy just a can of chickpeas at the store. I recommend getting the low sodium or no salt added versions of those. And you just basically drain them and rinse them. And then in this recipe, you're going to roast them. It puts basically a seasoning on them. They are a little bit bland unless they are seasoned. But this recipe has a really nice, simple, flavorful seasoning. So I like this one. And not too many spices that you need to have. This recipe is very easy, especially if you opt to buy a prepared tzatziki sauce instead of making a homemade version, which you can. I did. It was excellent, but it took more time. So they have like yogurt-based dips at the store that would work just as well. And usually you can find those in the refrigerated section by the salsas and things like that. The chickpeas have great benefits. So they're going to be a lower fat choice compared to the lamb. So very low calorie, they have lots of protein and lots of fiber. Any of your beans are going to be high protein and high fiber, which is really unique to plant foods. In animal foods, you can have high protein, but there's no fiber in an animal meat. This next one is a loaded potato with bacon and cheese, and the plant-based version of it is a loaded sweet potato with black beans and avocado. And I will add that you can make this with a regular potato, but I really love the combination of the black bean and the sweet potato together, which is why I usually do it with sweet potatoes. But if you don't like sweet potatoes, you can absolutely use a regular potato. It's one of my favorite go-tos because it's really filling and easy. The black beans, again, are a really nice filling ingredient with a lot of fiber, a lot of protein, and again, low calorie. One of the nice things about this one is if you have leftovers, you can use those the next day. You can throw them into a taco. I often use the bean mixture and make a quesadilla the next day, or you could do a tostada, something like that. And the ingredients really hold up because they're pretty starchy. And then I usually go pretty crazy with the add-ons. I love a lot of green onions, cilantro, and avocado, and even hot sauce. But you can even add sour cream or cheese and still make this a very healthy swap. All right, next one is sloppy joes. And so usually they're made with the beef, but this one uses lentils. This is surprisingly good. I have a lot of meat-heavy eaters in the family, and they have all approved this recipe and been very surprised with how good it was. So it's really so good you don't even really miss the meat. I love making the coleslaw with it because I think it gives it a little bit more flavor, but you can eat that. You can absolutely eat it plain with the bun. Otherwise, I oftentimes use some smashed avocado and kind of spread it on the bun to kind of give it a buttery texture. And then that, of course, adds another plant food to the meal. For the sauce, there are a lot of ingredients, but you can play around with this one and make it the flavor combination you like. If you don't have all of the ingredients, you don't need to run out and get them all. I promise this one's pretty foolproof. It will turn out. You can make the sauce a little bit more tangy by adding mustard or more Worcestershire, or you can make it a little sweeter by adding more honey or maple syrup and play with the spice level. Usually the chili powder is where you're going to get more of the heat. So doing less of the chili powder if you're not a big spice fan, and more of the chili powder if you want a little bit more heat kick to it. Again, the lentils are high in fiber, high in protein, and low in calories. So that's those are all some great benefits from that. All right, and fajitas. So this one is swapping out steak fajitas for portobello fajitas. For those of you out there who aren't very fond of beans, you can try mushrooms for a meatier texture and a good plant-based swap. They're not as high in protein, so you'd want to make sure you were kind of concentrating on protein in other parts of the day, but they're very low in calories. So if you're trying to reduce calories, that's a helpful swap. The nice thing, again, is they do really resemble the texture of meat, and they're very savory flavored like meat. And again, you can play with the spices to get them to the level of your liking. Again, that chili powder is going to give it more of a kick. You can also add a lot of sides like guacamole or avocado, salsa to give it a little bit more flavor. And if you've never cooked with portobellos before, I did add a note on this recipe about how to properly clean them before you cook them. Personally, I find them very earthy, and I really like that taste. And so I don't even need a lot of seasoning on them, but you can definitely add more seasoning if you want it to taste a little bit more like a fajita meat. Okay, and then the last one here is one of my favorites. I wanted to add one that didn't require any cooking because, you know, we don't always have time to cook or fuss with a bunch of dishes. So this one's pretty easy to do. And I like doing it maybe for a lunch. It's kind of hard to find healthy lunch swaps if you're trying to get away from using a lot of deli meat. So this is a good one for that. Like I said, the chickpeas, so this is a curry chicken salad. You're using chickpeas instead of chicken. The chickpeas, again, are more of a bland bean. So I like this because it adds a lot of flavor to them. And again, you can play with the spices. The recipe is very modifiable. You can add more curry powder or take a little bit more away if you're not looking for that type of spice. And you can swap out some of the add-ins that you have in your fridge, but the ones that I really liked were red pepper, carrot, raisins, and green onion. And that really gave me all the flavors I wanted with the curry. I always love some cilantro, some fresh cilantro on top, but some people are not a huge fan of that, so you can definitely omit it if you don't like it. The nice thing about this one is you can eat it alone. You can just eat it with a fork, and it's very filling from those beans. Or you can eat it with apple slices, which is a nice pair to it. You can wrap it up in a tortilla or a pita, especially with some greens or tomatoes or whatever else you like. And you can throw it in a Tupperware and take it to work. It's very portable, easy to take for a lunch. Usually when I make this one and stick it in the fridge at home, it disappears before I can even get to it the next day. So I think that's a sign that it's pretty good. All right, so just to wrap up here, a plant-based diet means that a majority of the foods on your plate includes whole plant foods. So you definitely do not have to be a vegan or a vegetarian, although you can be. Plant foods contain many nutritional benefits. Eating them in minimally processed forms really ensures that you get the most of these benefits. Research shows that there are long-term health benefits of eating plant-based diets, from our physical and mental health to our gut health. And making small, gradual lifestyle changes ensures that you're able to eat these, make sustainable changes for a lifetime. Again, try to find enjoyable ways to add these foods to your plate and try to get away from that negative diet mentality. So I hope today you leave not thinking of a plant-based diet as an all or nothing proposition. What I've done here is try to illustrate there are a lot of benefits that we can get from adding plant foods to our diets. But applying this to your life can be tricky. We are humans and we have a lot going on. We've got a busy life. Habits can get in the way. Other people around you may be tricky when you're dealing with food. So change is difficult. So start by just making some small, realistic goals that you can work on. And most of all, take time to reflect on the benefits of what you feel when you're eating these foods, from your energy and your sleep to your physical and your mental health. Today is really an opportunity to get excited about eating and your future health. So again, find ways to get excited about this, find recipes that you like, flavors you like, and make this a positive change. So